We human beings like to organize things. No, we need to organize things. And I don't just mean physical things like clothes or papers or books. We have a need to create order out of apparent chaos. That's why we are so fond of classifying people and groups. Sometimes our classifications are too simplistic, dividing the world of people into two opposing camps: liberals, conservatives, rich, poor, straight, gay. But we know that the world isn't so easily divided into binary categories. But still, the temptation to do it is very real. But that doesn't make the process of classifying people and things unimportant. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Thursday, August 21st, 2025. Classifying people and groups can be a helpful way to gain a sense of order in an otherwise confusing world. It helps us get our bearings. That's why H. Richard Niebuhr's Christ and Culture has had such staying power. He suggested a series of typical ways Christians have answered the vexing question of how we're supposed to live as Christian people, maintaining faithfulness to Jesus Christ, all while functioning within societies that also ask for our loyalty. So the rest of this week and into next week, I want to explore with you how Niebuhr goes about analyzing groups in the church to develop his typology. This week and next, I'll examine each of several theological issues he uses to establish his typology. But before I do that, there is one very important thing to say about the idea of types. When we talk about types of people, types of groups, or any other type of social phenomenon, we're getting into the field of sociology. Sociologists regularly classify groups of people based on any number of characteristics. They call it a typology. This can mean both the study of types generally, or of specific ways of categorizing people in groups. One very common typology that has been popular for many years now is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. It is a way of classifying people by personality type based on four polarities: introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. But here's the thing. Typologies are not the same thing as taxonomies. Okay, so what's a taxonomy? So a taxonomy is a scientific system of classifying objects through empirically verifiable physical characteristics. We can classify animals, for example, through an increasingly specific set of criteria: mammal or non-mammal, vertebrate or invertebrate, and so on. Taxonomies are based on physical characteristics that are objective. But many people confuse typologies with taxonomies. Typologies generally concern behaviors, which by definition are open to interpretation. Classifications based on behaviors are inherently subjective. Taxonomies, on the other hand, are generally based on physical characteristics that can be objectively observed and classified. I know I'm getting into the weeds here just a little bit, but I think it is helpful to understand what H. Richard Niebuhr is doing in Christ and Culture. He's developing a typology of different ways Christians over the centuries have tried to come to terms with the competing demands of Christian discipleship and life in human community. And, like any typology, Niebuhr's typology is subject to debate and disagreement. In the 75 years since he delivered his lectures at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, scholars have debated the accuracy and usefulness of his typology. And they should. No typology is perfect because it is a description of behaviors which are always open to subjective interpretation. By the same token, Niebuhr's typology has remained a standard which students and scholars have used ever since, even if they argue with his underlying reasoning. There is a reason why this book has remained in print all this time. It's because, for whatever drawbacks it may have, it remains a useful tool for talking about the differences we see in how different church traditions operate. Just one more quick word, and then we're off to the races. Niebuhr didn't invent the idea of typologies when analyzing the church, and his typology closely resembles the typology of an earlier German scholar named Ernst Troeltsch. Troeltsch's major work was a book called The Social Teachings of the Christian Churches. In it, he created a three-part typology of churches, sects, and monastics. Scholars have long noted the family resemblance of Niebuhr's work to Troeltsch's. So where does this leave us, and why is this important? Simply this: we human beings do have a real need to have ways to understand our very complex and confusing world. Organizing people and groups using typologies can help us get our bearings. Niebuhr's way of describing different typical answers to the church and the Christ and culture problem, potentially helps us not only understand, but even appreciate those whose approach to the problem is different from our own. When we return tomorrow, we'll work our way through the polarities and theological issues Niebuhr uses to create his typology. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.